Hello, Internet. I am Pastor Recoil, and welcome to my parish. Today is the 6th Sunday after Pentecost, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Pastor Recoil's parish, where I talk about some things you may not have heard about in church, either because it's not quite appropriate for all audiences or it just isn't something that's easy to talk about in a sermon. The readings for the 6th Sunday after Pentecost are Genesis 24, 34 through 38, 42 through 49, and 58 through 67, Psalm 45, 10 through 17, Romans 7, 15 through 25a, and Matthew 11, 16 through 19, and 25 to 30. We're going to talk about some more than slightly awkward events. And in my regular Sunday sermon, I skipped over today's reading from Genesis, because there's a lot that happens in there that takes too much explanation for church. So instead, y'all get it here. I don't know how else to say this, but welcome to a world in which oaths are sealed with hands-on penises. Because that's how our story begins. At the beginning of Genesis 24, Abraham says to his most trusted slave, probably Eliezer of Damascus, the same one who was to inherit Abraham's wealth before the births of Ishmael, Isaac, and his handful of other children, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live, but will go to my country and my kindred and get a wife for my son Isaac." Now, as much as I hate handshakes in general and the whole concept of shaking on agreements, it's a whole lot better than putting your hand under someone's thigh, which is an ancient way of swearing an incredibly binding oath, swearing it on the genitals of the patriarch of the family, which was meant to reinforce the connection between family members and also, if the oath is broken, probably lead to swift retribution from other family members for the great disrespect that it would show. Now, this isn't the only time that the Bible is going to be overly focused on penises, by the way. There's the covenant of circumcision, which men who belong to God will look different in their downstairs. There's Joseph's oath to his father Jacob, and a little bit later, that is also penile, to bury Jacob in Canaan and not in Egypt. There's the passage in 2 Samuel where David's bride price for Saul's daughter Michal was 100 foreskins of Israel's enemy. And then the Christian scriptures have a lot of focus on foreskins too, as they're trying to figure out who is in and out of God's kingdom. What I'm saying is those folk that say the Bible isn't for kids may actually have a bit of a point, because there's a whole lot of penis talk. The other thing that ended up causing a whole lot of problems for Israel, and to a lesser extent for Christians, is that Abraham is rather insistent that his son's wife come from his own people back in Aram rather than any of the women who lived in Canaan. This kicks off a whole unfortunate trend for God's people, one that ends up getting codified in the law that members of this community that God is creating, are not meant to marry outside of God's community. We actually have a record of this kind of argument about should you do this or shouldn't you, as we have the story in Ezra and Nehemiah calling for all of the Israelites to divorce their foreign wives, that was being written about the same time as the book of Ruth, showing the importance of foreigners in the line and history of Israel, especially as a foreign wife is in the ancestry of their great hero, King David. But anyhow, the servant swears the oath, goes back to Aram, and heads to the city of Nahor, named for Abraham's brother. As he's watering his camels, a woman comes up and fits the rather unique criteria that he's created and bestows on her riches. Probably not quite as forcefully as the story makes it seem, and then he works to convince the woman's family that this woman, Rebecca, is the one to marry Isaac. Now, Rebecca's a bit interesting because she breaks a lot of the cultural norms in ways that make her seem like a very independent woman. She interacts with a man outside of her family. She introduces herself as the daughter of Bethuel, her father, who is the son of Milcah, her grandmother, not the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor, as would have been normal. And even though the whole marriage is arranged for her, it's interesting that at one point they do ask her opinion of the situation, and that she is willing to go. Rebecca's story ends up paralleling Abraham's, leaving her family and her gods, going to a place that she doesn't know. She also gets kind of a badass blessing. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes. And as time goes on, Rebecca continues to be quite independent. In a couple of chapters, she will conspire with her favorite son, Jacob, to steal the final patriarchal blessing that belongs to her husband's favorite son, Esau. And this story from Genesis 24 really highlights how much is going on in the Bible that when we just get a surface reading, we miss. There are nuances and complication that come up that really take some study and interpretation to understand. Even this simple story of someone getting engaged highlights how much else goes on around these stories. We love to make the Bible simple, but it's really a complex book, and it needs to be interpreted to understand. Otherwise, you get in trouble and end up using what is meant to be the story of God's interactions with humanity as a weapon used to harm others. So if you want to see more content like this, check out the links to my right, or click the logo below my face to subscribe so you'll know when my next video comes out. Thank you for watching, and take the time this week to love your neighbor as yourself, especially if you don't like them all that much.